Hello everybody, welcome back to the Flix Files. So we're now into 1984 in my series of videos about the 1980s and picking out some of my favourite movies. And 1984 is a real cracker of a year for film. And when I looked at the movies that I owned that were made in 1984, I have between 20-25 films off the top of my head, and I've picked out 10 to talk about, and these are all fantastic films. I can't really praise them high enough, and I just hope as I go through them that you will agree with me, and that hopefully you will have seen a big portion of these movies. I'd recommend every single one of them. So if by some miracle some of these films you've never seen, then I would really strongly say to find them out and to give them a watch at your earliest opportunity. So I'm really looking forward to this, so let's get right into it. The very first film in 1984 that I want to talk about is the second Indiana Jones movie, Temple of Doom. I have always liked Temple of Doom. I like all of the Indiana Jones films to varying degrees. The original trilogy are all excellent. Temple of Doom is my favourite of the original trilogy. Kingdom of the Crystal Skull kind of grows on me the more I watch it, the older that film gets and the older that I get. I think if somebody could do a fan edit and remove the terrible CGI monkeys scene, it would make it so much better. And then the latest one, Dial of Destiny, is okay. I have it, but I'm hoping it will get better the more I watch it, whenever that will be. But Temple of Doom is by far my favourite Indiana Jones movie. I like the fact that it took a darker turn, and I just love the setting as well. Quite a portion of this movie was filmed in Sri Lanka, and I had a holiday there last year, which I did a video about, and I tried to find some of the locations that they used in this movie because I was in one of those areas, but I was unsuccessful. I got quite close to one of the locations, but it was too overgrown to get really close to it, unfortunately. But it's just a terrific movie, and it has so many classic sequences. The minecart chase is the one that immediately comes to mind that everybody remembers, and the rope bridge sequence towards the end. And it just benefits from having that slightly darker and harder edge, which was attributed to the fact that George Lucas was going through a divorce at the time, apparently, when he was working on the story. So he wasn't in a very good mood, in his own words. But it is a terrific movie, and I have the Indiana Jones box set, which has the first 4 movies in 4K. And it is a terrific box set because the quality of those movies in high definition is just fantastic. So I would really recommend it. So already we're off to an absolutely terrific start with 1984 because Temple of Doom is such a cracking movie. So the next movie I want to talk about is David Lynch, and it's his version of the science fiction novel Dune by Frank Herbert. And I've always liked this film, and I know it has a lot of people that are never a big fan of it, and they find it very confusing and convoluted. And yes, it does try and cram a lot of ideas and story into the film. There is kind of a 3-hour TV version, I think it's called, that's now available on physical media. But I just got the Arrow release last year that has the theatrical version. And it's, as is the case with Arrow, it's a fantastic release. It has some really good extras, and they did a good remaster on the picture. And obviously Denis Villeneuve, the Canadian filmmaker, he did a remake of Dune in 2 parts, which is a superb couple of movies. And apparently he's now working on Dune Messiah, I think it's called, which is the 3rd novel in the Dune series. I've only ever read the original. I've got the original Dune in hardback, and I've read it a number of times over the years. But David Lynch's version trumps the newer version in one area, and I think that that's in the production design. I love the kind of steampunk-esque vibe that David Lynch's Dune gives off. The new Dune movies are absolutely brilliant, but I find the production design in them to be very minimalist and almost sparse. And it must be a style that Denis Villeneuve likes, because when he did Blade Runner 2049, that had a similar style to it, with very large, empty rooms. But David Lynch just took a bit more care and time on creating the world of Dune. And I like the way his Harkonnens look in comparison to the new version. And also the Mentats, the human computers, look better in his version. And it's just a nice little 80s science fiction movie that I've always enjoyed. And I've always said to people that find it confusing is, if you're going to watch Dune, David Lynch's version, then you have to pay attention to what Virginia Madsen's character says in the opening few moments of the movie, because she kind of gives you a broad outline of the universe. And if you can take in that opening monologue, hopefully it will make the rest of the movie make more sense. But I always like it, so I wanted to include it in this list. And I hope you'll agree with me that I mean, I've always been a huge fan of David Lynch. I was devastated when he passed away. And although his film work isn't extensive, it is a case of quality over quantity, should we say. He's a lot like Stanley Kubrick in that area. He didn't do a huge amount of movies, but what he did do is varied and of a higher level than some of the other filmmakers that were working at the time. So the next one is Joe Dante's Gremlins. Now, Joe Dante, I've already done a video about him, and I talked about the films of his that I own. So as always, I'll just put a link up if I've done a video that relates to what I'm talking about, and I'll just put a little link up simply because I can. And I've been a big fan of Joe Dante for many years. This was the movie that kind of propelled him into the big leagues, because it was a huge hit in 1984. Unfortunately, he never really replicated that success. He did a number of movies after Gremlins that I really, really enjoyed, but they never reached the heady heights of Gremlins in terms of the box office. But it was a huge movie at the time that it was released. And I can remember seeing the teaser trailers on the TV, where they would open up, in the trailer, they'd open up the box that Mogwai was in. And his little paws, his little hands would come up over the edge of the box, and just before his head popped up, they would cut away so you didn't get to see him. And it was a real teaser in the true sense of the word. And just a big event movie. It was one of those films that you felt left out if you hadn't seen it. And I remember it being a huge, huge success on video as well. It was another one of those films that when it came out on video was really difficult to get a copy to rent at the time. But it was a great film, and it still is a great film. He did a sequel. He did Gremlins 2 in 1990, I think it was, which expanded it in rather a fun way. I wasn't a huge fan of it when I first saw it, but I'm a big fan of the YouTube channel Red Letter Media, and they often talk about Gremlins 2 on that channel and how it means a lot to them. And it made me kind of reappraise the movie later in life, and I do find that I'm growing more fond of it as I get older. And I have those two films as like a double DVD set, because that was the only way I could buy it at the time. I only set out to get the original Gremlins, but when I saw I could buy them both, I thought, well, why not? It's okay to own the second one on physical media. So the next one is James Cameron's The Terminator. My God, again, all of these films are just just bring back warm, fuzzy feelings. And I can remember watching this for the first time on video, and it just being completely bowled me over. I thought it was absolutely fantastic, and it still is a terrific movie. It spawned a hell of a lot of sequels, and it's fair to say that only the Terminator 2, the one that James Cameron did, was worthwhile, and in some ways was better than the first one. But I've always been a big fan of this movie because it's the only Terminator movie where Schwarzenegger is the baddie. And as much as I like Terminator 2 Judgment Day, I think it always worked better to have the Schwarzenegger T100 as the T800, sorry, as a baddie, and just having him coming after you, the big bulk that he is. And I can remember reading when this was out, and I'd seen it a couple of times at this point, that Cameron was going to be doing the sequel to Alien, and it made me re-watch the Terminator a number of times because I tried to imagine the aesthetic that he used in the Terminator and apply that to an Alien movie. And sure enough, when I saw Aliens at the cinema in 1986, it completely bowled me over, and I thought, he's done it. I didn't think we could get a sequel to Alien that would be worthwhile, but bloody hell, he really knocked it out of the park with that one. And a funny little story that's kind of related that I always enjoy is when James Cameron pitched his idea to the studio for his sequel to Alien. Apparently all he did was he walked into the meeting and wrote the word alien on a sheet of paper on one of those large sort of white notepad boards that you can get, and he then drew a big S on the end of it, so it just said aliens, and then he drew 2 vertical lines through the S to turn it into a $sign. And apparently that was enough to win the studio execs over, and they commissioned him to write a plot outline, which I thought was absolutely fantastic. So my next movie for 1984 is a film by a German director called Wim Wenders. This is the only movie of his that I own, and it's the only movie of Wim Wenders that I've actually seen. And I must have seen this on terrestrial television at some point during the mid to late 80s, and I just loved it. It's kind of a road movie, and it starts off in the deserts of Texas, and then from there we move to Los Angeles, and then finally I think he ends up in Houston. He goes back to, is it Houston? But the whole thing is Harry Dean Stanton is usually a secondary actor in movies, but this is a movie where they put him front and center, and he really got to flex his acting muscles. And it's a nice, what I would call slow burn of a movie, where at the beginning he's just walking solitarily through the Texan desert, and we can see that he's been walking for a long time because his shoes are almost destroyed, and he's just carrying nothing but a bottle of water, and he's looking quite disheveled. And for the first kind of 30-40 minutes of the movie, he doesn't say a single line of dialogue. He just doesn't speak. And the movie is where he gets reconnected with his brother, and we learn that he's trying to find a woman that he was in a relationship with, that he had a son with, and he wants to try and reconnect with her. And that's the basis of the movie. It was written by the actor Sam Shepard, and it's just a really well, as I say, structured and a nice slow burn movie with some absolutely terrific cinematography. And I always find that when you have European filmmakers that make movies in America, they can look at America with a fresh set of eyes, should we say, and they can put a slightly different spin on things. It's much like when Paul Verhoeven came over to make RoboCop, and the slant that he gave that movie. But yeah, it's a very very good film, and it's a lovely Blu-ray. I was really happy when I saw that this was getting a Blu-ray release, because it was, for the longest time, it was a hard movie to get hold of, and I'm really happy that I've got it. So the next one is a sequel to a science fiction movie, and this was directed by Peter Hyams, and I've done a video about him where I talked about the movies of his that I owned, because he is a director that I've always enjoyed. And Arthur C. Clarke wrote 2001: A Space Odyssey, and he wrote that story because Stanley Kubrick wanted to make a science fiction movie, and he got in contact with Arthur C. Clarke to ask him to come up with an idea. And he did, and they made that movie, and the movie is quite ambiguous. It's, as with most Stanley Kubrick films, it kind of leaves a lot open to your imagination and allows you to put your own interpretation onto that movie. But then Arthur C. Clarke wrote a follow-up novel in the early 80s called 2010 Odyssey 2, and it was Peter Hyams who made the brave decision to do it as a movie. And I think it's a cracking science fiction movie because it explains 2010 in a way that makes you go, oh right, yes. And it makes that first movie less ambiguous. Now, some people may say it would have been better just leaving it as it is. But as a standalone movie, 2010 is excellent. It has fantastic special effects by Industrial Light and Magic. It has some very good production design. It's very much kind of based in real world sort of space travel. So it paints a realistic picture of how you think it would be in that kind of alternate future. And it's just a very good film, and it's one that I've always enjoyed. Again, the main star is Roy Scheider. And I mentioned him in the last video. He's one of those actors that I've always enjoyed watching, and yeah, I really like it. I'm hoping that this will also get a 4K release at some point. The Blu-ray's okay. It's the best I've ever owned this in terms of quality, but a 4K would really elevate it, I think. So the next movie is a little bit of an oddity, an indie movie called Repo-Man. And this was made by a British filmmaker called Alex Cox. And I think the most famous movie that he directed is one I've not seen, but it's called Sid and Nancy, about the Sex Pistols. And I've never really watched that film. I didn't think it would appeal to me. But I have seen Repo-Man many times, and this is a fairly recent purchase for me. Because I got thinking about that movie and how I enjoyed it when I watched it way back when, at some point in the 80s. And yeah, it's it's a difficult film to talk about because it is a bit of a strange movie, but that's one of the things that I really like about it. But it's got something to do with Emilio Estevez gets a job as kind of a repo man, so he repossesses cars where the owners haven't been keeping up the payments, and he gets put under the wing of Harry Dean Stanton, who's a bit of an old hack at this sort of thing, and he kind of tutors him in the art of repossessing cars. And at some point in the plot, there is a car that has some sort of an alien artifact in the boot. And again, that's all I will say, because part of the fun of this movie is discovering it if you've never watched it before, and just watching the events unfold. But it is a real 80s movie. It has a nice vibe to it, and it's one that I was glad that I bought to put in my collection, because I really enjoyed watching it again after all these years. And yeah, it's just a nice movie to give a try if you haven't seen it. And it has quite a cult following, so there may be some of you out there that will know exactly what I'm talking about with this film, and will probably rate this above all the others that I mentioned. Right, the next one is a kind of a sports movie. I've said in previous videos that I've always been a fan of sports movies. and I have quite a few of them, but this is a baseball movie, and it was directed by Barry Levinson. Now, Barry Levinson, I became aware of him as a filmmaker with a film called Diner that was very dialogue heavy. But Barry Levinson tended to make quite a few movies that he wrote. So he had a very good ear for dialogue and for comedic dialogue. And then he did this movie called The Natural, and I think after this he made a film called Tin Men, which I love, and I did a deep dive on. And that is a movie that I hope gets a physical release. God knows why it's not been released up till now, but I've never been able to find a copy of it on Blu-ray. And then I think the most successful film he did was Rain Man with Tom Cruise a couple of years after that. But The Natural is about a baseball player played by Robert Redford, who kind of tries to get back into the professional game later in his life. And he has a baseball bat that he crafted as a young man that was made from the wood of a tree that was struck by lightning. So it gives this bat kind of a slightly magical element in that whenever he uses this bat, it makes him an absolutely amazing batter, and he can hit just about everything that's thrown at him and knock it out of the park. And it's just a lovely feel-good sports movie that has some fantastic cinematography by a chap called, I think his name's Caleb Deschanel, I think is how you pronounce it. And he was also the director of photography in the movie that I praised in the last video, The Right Stuff. So it has a very similar feel in the way it looks to that movie. But it's just a fantastic feel-good sports movie. So what could be better than that for a Sunday afternoon? And if you do like your sports movies and you've not seen The Natural, then I would highly recommend you find a copy or dig it out on streaming somewhere and see if you can watch it, because it's just a lovely film. And I guarantee that you'll come away from that movie with a big smile on your face. So we're down to the last two movies now, because I tried to limit the selection because I could have quite easily picked another 5 movies, but I was determined to only pick what I feel are the real cream of the crop of 1984. So we're down to the last 2, and the next one is the absolutely terrific action comedy Beverly Hills Cop starring Eddie Murphy. And this was a movie that when I first rented it on VHS, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I just loved everything about it. I loved Eddie Murphy's performance. I loved the story. It was a really fantastic comedy. It made me laugh out loud in so many different places. Terrific soundtrack by Howell Faltermeyer. And I remember this was one of the first movies that I ever bought on VHS when they started to release films to buy in the 80s. And I think Paramount were one of the first studios that did this. And I can remember being over the moon when I actually bought a copy of this film, because it would have been 3 or 4 years before it would have been shown on television. So I was able to kind of own a copy, and I ended up watching it dozens of times, it must have been, and I never got tired of it. And it occurred to me that I think this was the first Eddie Murphy movie that I ever saw. Because prior to this, he would have made a couple of other big hitters, 48 Hours and Trading Places. And I have both of those movies. And I really like both those movies. But Beverly Hills Cop was the one that kind of introduced me to Eddie Murphy. So it really made me become a big fan of him throughout the 80s with all the films that he did during that time, because he was so charismatic and just naturally funny. It's just a really, really good, fun movie. And I have this twice, because I have the Beverly Hills Cop box set that has the 3 movies in, because I actually quite like Beverly Hills Cop 2 and 3, amazingly. Not many people like Beverly Hills Cop 3, the John Landis one, but I thought it was quite funny. It wasn't as good as the first one, no, I admit, but as a comedy movie, a comedy action movie, it still has some quite good moments in it. But then I bought Beverly Hills Cop on 4K, and they've since released the other two movies on 4K, but I thought, well, I think I can live not having the other two on 4K, but it's nice having the original movie on 4K because it is a nice quality disc. And like I said before, there are a certain core amount of movies that I have to own on 4K, and they would be day one releases if they ever do get released, and this was one of them. As was the next one, and this is the last movie that I'm going to mention for 1984, and you're probably going to guess what I'm going to say, because I think this was one of the biggest blockbusters of 1984. I haven't looked up what was the most successful movie of 84. I'm guessing it was either Temple of Doom, Gremlins, or this movie. And the movie is, of course, Ghostbusters, the fantastic supernatural comedy. Bloody hell, this was... I don't think there'd been a movie like this up to the point Ghostbusters was released. It's just it's like Back to the Future. You can't say anything bad about it. The script is so tight and so well constructed. There's no fat in there. Not a single minute is wasted. And the comedy is just this perfect blend of just visual humor and real dry one-liners, and to think you have like Bill Murray in his absolute prime playing the kind of schlubby, doesn't really want to do it, but he has to make a living somehow. When you have Dan Aykroyd, who's kind of the nerdy, enthusiastic one, and Harold Ramis, bless him, who's kind of the brains of the outfit, who comes up with all the equipment and comes up with the solution. He's like the Spock of the Ghostbusters team. And it's just a fantastic film, really good, funny visual effects by Richard Edlund. And yeah, this was just a massive movie in 1984. And I can remember at one point in that year not being able to escape Ghostbusters because it seemed to be everywhere. Whenever you walked into a shop, and if they had the radio on, it would be the Ray Parker Jr. theme playing. And you would see the logo everywhere on magazines, in posters on windows, on t-shirts. And sure enough, when it eventually came out on videotape, it was a massive hit. And it was just and quite rightly so, just a monumental movie. And I love it so much. So obviously I have it on 4K, and I have Ghostbusters 2 on 4K as well. And this will be a movie that I'll do a deep dive on, absolutely. It's a movie that I could talk about for a whole hour, so I don't want to get into it in too deep in this video. But there we are. That is my selection of 10 films from the year 1984, and hopefully, or if I haven't already done so in this series, this video will make you realize just what a cracking year 1984 was for movies. Now you compare that to, let's say, the last few years, to 2024 and 2023, and you try and pick out 10 movies from those last 2 years of a quality equal to the ones that I've just talked about. And I think you'll find it's almost an impossibility, which is a really, really sad thing to say. But that's why we have a library of films that we can dip into and enjoy and revisit. And thank God we can do that. So, 1985 next. I've already looked at what movies I'm going to be talking about in that year, and it's pretty big again, as I think is 1986 and 1987. So we're really getting into the throw of it now. We're halfway there. So I hope you stick with me. I hope you're enjoying this series. I'm really enjoying doing them. I think it's a brilliant idea to pick a handful of films and quickly talk about them all. So if you enjoyed that, give me a thumbs up, guys, and I will see you very soon. So take care of yourselves and bye for now.